Well, as you all know, today is National Hot Dog Day.
This is Mitt Romney. It's crazy to think now, but there was a time when this man was considered America's best chance at stopping Barack Obama. Despite rising to the Republican nominations for president in 2012, Romney would end his political career as one of the most hated figures within the Republican Party. He was a CEO, a governor, a presidential candidate, and a United States senator. Yet by the end of his career, he was getting booed at Republican conventions. How did Mitt Romney fall from America's best chance at unseating Obama to being booed in his home state and retiring from the Senate after a single term?
I love hot dogs. I love them in buns. I love them outside of buns. I love them with baked beans. I just like hot dogs. It's the best, meat there is, without question.
Willard Mitt Romney was born on March 12, 1947 in Detroit, Michigan. His mother, Lenore, was an actress from Logan, Utah, and his father, George, was a businessman born in a Mormon colony in Chihuahua, Mexico. George had risen to CEO of American Motors and become a national figure by the mid-1950s. In 1962, he was elected governor of Michigan while Mitt was still in high school. After graduating in 1965, he enrolled at Stanford University for a year before moving to France to serve as an LDS missionary. After returning home, he married his high school girlfriend Ann Davies and enrolled at BYU in Provo, Utah. After graduating with a bachelor's in English in 1971, he enrolled at Harvard in 1972 as part of its joint JD MBA Law and Business program. By the time he graduated from Harvard in 1975, he and his wife had 3 sons, and they were known to be active in their community and church. He briefly joined the Boston Consulting Group and even became close friends with his colleague Benjamin Netanyahu before joining Bain Company in 1977. After spending years as a successful management consultant for Bain Company, Romney co-founded Bain Capital, a spin-off private equity investment firm. The company was launched in 1984 and initially operated as a venture capital firm, investing in promising young companies before moving into leveraged buyouts, purchasing established companies with borrowed money, restructuring their operations, and cutting costs before selling the company a few years later for profit. Bain invested in more than 70 companies during Romney's leadership, including Staples, Sports Authority, Domino's Pizza, Sealy, Brookstone, and several industrial and healthcare companies. Romney and Bain were extraordinarily financially successful. A Wall Street Journal analysis of Romney-era investments found that Bain invested roughly $1.1 billion and generated about $2.5 billion in gains for its investors, with annual returns estimated at about 50 to 80%. Romney also became enormously wealthy in the process. By 2012, his personal fortune was estimated at roughly $190 to $250 million, much of it stemming from his career at Bain. However, much of that success came with a controversial business model that would hurt his and Bain's reputation. Their restructurings often involved large layoffs, plant closures, wage and benefit cuts, outsourcing, and loading acquired companies with debt. Companies such as Dade International and American Pad and Paper became prominent examples used by Romney's critics, who argued that Bain could make substantial returns for investors even when workers lost their jobs or companies later failed. After nearly 2 decades in business, Romney decided to follow in his father's footsteps and made his first run for political office in 1994, challenging Democratic Senator Ted Kennedy. Ted Kennedy was the youngest brother of former President John F. Kennedy and Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, and was first elected to the Senate in 1962. He was also the uncle of HHS Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr. and Special Olympics founder and Tropic Thunder hater Timothy Shriver. By 1994, Kennedy had become one of the most powerful Democrats in America, and even then Massachusetts was considered a safe blue seat. But some Republicans believed his personal scandals, combined with a potential midterm red wave, made him unusually vulnerable and hoped a strong candidate could flip the seat. Romney took a leave of absence from Bain Capital and officially announced his candidacy in February 1994. He easily secured the nomination by winning 82% in the Massachusetts Republican primary. Romney was what many would consider a moderate Republican. He supported protecting the status quo of Roe v. Wade, balancing the federal budget, and opposing tax increases. By September, some polls had Romney and Kennedy running fairly even. However, Romney's record and reputation at Bain Capital, which his campaign had made central to his pro-business message, had become Kennedy's main criticism of Romney. In July 1994, Bain controlled American Pad and Paper purchased an office supply plant in Marion, Indiana. Shortly after the acquisition was finalized, roughly 250 workers were laid off and told they could reapply for their jobs at lower wages and reduced benefits. Many of these workers traveled to Massachusetts to follow Romney around the campaign trail, heckling him about his tenure at Bain. It was a brutal image, and it hurt Romney across the state. In a year that saw Republicans win historic elections nationwide, including securing their first congressional majority since 1952, Romney lost to Kennedy 41-58. Romney returned to Bain Capital the day after the election and reportedly told his brother, "I never want to run for something again unless I can win." In 1995, the International Olympic Committee awarded the 2002 Olympic Winter Games to Salt Lake City. This would be Utah's first time hosting the Games, and the state's leaders were eager to ensure they would run smoothly. However, in 1998, evidence emerged that the IOC had accepted millions in illegal bribes connected with Salt Lake's bid, including scholarships, travel and medical expenses, and other favors. The scandal was massive. 10 IOC members were expelled, and federal bribery and fraud charges were brought against Salt Lake bid organizers. Sponsors began to threaten to pull their support, and new sponsors were impossible to attract, with many companies worried about becoming associated with the corrupt Olympics. By February 1999, the Salt Lake Olympic Committee projected it had a nearly $400 million budget deficit and was in desperate need of a CEO to right the ship. Enter Mitt Romney. Romney took a leave of absence from Bain Capital and was hired as CEO of the Salt Lake Olympic Committee and immediately went to the task of restructuring leadership, raising funds, and recruiting sponsors while cutting operation budgets. He was able to convince nervous sponsors to stay after bringing in millions from new sponsors and helped modernize the online ticketing process. This resulted in 95% of available tickets sold, the highest of any Olympic Games to that point, and generated $180 million in revenue. By the time the Games ended, the 2002 Salt Lake Olympics were considered one of the greatest Winter Olympics in history. The Salt Lake Olympic Committee ended with a $100 million operating surplus, and many of the venues continue to be used today and will be used in the 2034 Winter Games. The turnaround transformed Romney's public image, recasting him as an out-of-touch businessman into a nationally recognized problem solver who fixed the corrupt Olympics. Even before the Olympics ended, people began to speculate about Romney's political future, especially after he announced he wouldn't return to Bain Capital and intended to seek opportunities for public service. Rumors circulated that he would try running for statewide office in Utah, but Senators Orrin Hatch and Bob Bennett were considered invincible, and the governor's race wasn't until 2004. Back in Massachusetts, Republicans were eager to find a candidate who could replace Governor Jane Swift as their candidate for the 2002 race. Swift was unpopular with low approval ratings, and Republicans hoped a stronger candidate could help them hold control of the governor's mansion. Romney returned to Massachusetts shortly after the Games ended in Salt Lake, and on March 19th, after Governor Swift announced she wouldn't seek re-election and endorsed him, he announced his campaign for governor. Massachusetts was still considered as deeply blue in 2002 as it was in 1994. At the time of the election, Democrats controlled all 10 of Massachusetts' congressional districts, both of their senators, and held supermajorities in both chambers of the state legislature. However, Republicans were surprisingly competitive in the governor's races, winning every election since 1990. Romney sought to replicate his predecessor's successes by running as a fiscally conservative moderate whose definition of conservative Republican was essentially conserving the status quo. He promised to protect the state's pro-choice laws and strict gun control laws while campaigning against raising taxes and legalizing gay marriage. Massachusetts voters trusted his vision, and in November 2002, Mitt Romney was elected the 70th governor of Massachusetts, defeating his Democratic opponent 50 to 45%. Romney was sworn into office in January 2003. In a state controlled by Democrats at nearly every level, Romney's tenure was highlighted by his negotiations and vetoes. Romney's administration went to task balancing the state's budget, which was operating at a $650 million deficit when he came into office, by pairing spending cuts with increases on fees. He also issued more than 800 vetoes, although 700 of them would be overridden by the legislature. He also championed the state's takeover of its health insurance industry, signing Massachusetts' landmark healthcare law in April 2006. The law mandated nearly everyone to obtain health insurance, established a state-sponsored healthcare marketplace, added new benefits requirements for employers, and provided free healthcare for lower-income residents. The law would later be dubbed Romneycare, and it definitely would not come back to haunt his political career later. Romney's statewide approval rating reached as high as 66% in November 2003, but by 2005 he had fallen back down to earth and sat around 50%. Not bad for a Republican governor in a deep blue state. However, despite the election for governor scheduled for November 2006, Romney's sights were set on a different election, the presidential election of 2008. In December 2005, he announced he would not seek re-election and serve out the remainder of his term, saying he had accomplished what he had set out to achieve as governor while dismissing questions about his presidential ambitions. He spent his final year in office in 2006 as chairman of the Republican Governors Association, spending more than 200 days traveling across the country and building out his national political network. He also spent time meticulously rebranding his Republican credentials. After campaigning as a moderate in 2002, Romney spoke against Massachusetts' pro-choice abortion laws and declared himself pro-life. When the state became the first to legalize gay marriage in 2004, Romney spoke against the ruling and became an advocate for a constitutional amendment to define marriage between a man and a woman. Free from needing to win over independent liberals, Romney spent the following years rebranding himself as a solid social conservative who reined in liberal spending and saved America's most recent Olympic Games from disaster. Romney left office in January 2007. He was replaced by Deval Patrick, who won the 2006 election with 55% to become the first Democrat elected governor in Massachusetts since 1986. Just over a month later, on February 13, 2007, Mitt Romney announced his campaign for president at the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan. Republican President George Bush was term limited, and Vice President Dick Cheney had decided against running by early 2005, so the nomination was wide open. Other Republicans who joined the race included New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani, Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, Texas Congressman Ron Paul, and Arizona Senator John McCain. Despite strong initial showings, Romney struggled to carve out his own lane. McCain had the post-9/11 national security credentials, Huckabee held the strongest evangelical support, and Ron Paul had the anti-government and anti-establishment base. Romney won a handful of critical states during the early course of the primary, including Massachusetts, Utah, and Michigan. However, a few days after taking heavy losses in the 2008 Super Tuesday elections, Romney suspended his campaign and threw his support behind McCain. He joined McCain on the campaign trail and went on to appear alongside him at events. However, American voters were desperate for change. The housing bubble crash of 2007 and 2008 had triggered the Great Recession, and the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan had left millions dissatisfied with Bush and the Republicans. In November 2008, 47-year-old Barack Obama defeated 72-year-old John McCain and was elected President of the United States. The election was a landslide. Obama won almost 53% of the popular vote, 365 electoral points, and carried nearly every major swing state. Republicans were beaten down and Democrats held a strong electoral mandate, but when they began to overstep, they laid the foundation for Romney's return. Obama was sworn in as president in January 2009 and by mid-2010 had already ignited a firestorm of controversy and anger among Republican and independent voters. The recovery from the Great Recession remained sluggish and unemployment stayed high. The administration's attempts at recovery with stimulus packages and bailouts became unpopular, and the passage of the Affordable Care Act triggered an enormous backlash. By March 2010, Obama's approval ratings had fallen below 50%. The Tea Party movement became an embodiment of many of the American people's frustrations with the federal government, including its out-of-control spending, bailouts, takeover of healthcare, and unending foreign wars, among other grievances. Massive Tea Party protests sprung up in Washington, D.C. and other cities. Paired with the Occupy protests in cities like New York and the general malcontent among both liberals and conservatives, it was clear. Americans were unhappy with the direction its leaders were taking them. In 2010, the midterm elections handed a massive electoral defeat to Obama and the Democrats. Republicans flipped 6 seats in the Senate, won 242 seats in the House of Representatives, and secured or expanded their majorities in state houses across the country. The writing was on the wall. With the right candidate, the Republicans could easily prevent Obama from winning a second term in 2012. Mitt Romney announced his second campaign for president on June 2, 2011 in New Hampshire. After winning more than 4.6 million votes and finishing second in the 2008 primary, he was considered by many to be the frontrunner for the 2012 nomination. The Republican field included Texas Governor Rick Perry, businessman Herman Cain, former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich, Pennsylvania Governor Rick Santorum, and Ron Paul. Despite being one of the early favorites, Romney once again received criticism for his record as governor of Massachusetts. This included his contradictory statements on abortion and the Massachusetts healthcare bill he had championed as governor, which had become the blueprint for Obama's Affordable Care Act and its widely unpopular federal mandate that individuals buy healthcare. Still, Romney maintained the bulk of the establishment support and was consistently putting up strong primary election performances. In February 2012, Romney stood alongside businessman and reality TV personality Donald Trump and accepted his endorsement ahead of the Nevada caucus. After a contentious primary, Santorum suspended his campaign in April and Romney accepted the Republican nomination at the June RNC convention. Romney decided to nominate Wisconsin Congressman Paul Ryan as his running mate, hoping the young representative could help him secure Wisconsin and some of the Midwestern states. Polls showed Romney and Obama running neck and neck for much of the campaign, and each of them swapped debate victories. Obama's leadership and economic recovery was an issue to many voters, yet Romney failed to connect any better with working-class voters who felt they had been left behind by both Democrats and Republicans in D.C. While some shared his vision for a more fiscally conservative government, many saw him as an out-of-touch Mormon private equity executive who wanted to run the country like a business, and he failed to build the coalition he needed. Obama was re-elected in November 2012, winning 51% of the popular vote and capturing 332 electoral votes. Despite the loss, Romney had improved on McCain's performance, flipping North Carolina and Indiana. To many, Romney's loss signaled the end of the Republican Party, and in some ways it was. At the very least, it marked the end of the compassionate conservative wing of the party having any control at the national level and the beginning of the MAGA takeover. Obama invited Romney to the White House after the election to signal unity, and holy shit, look how dead inside he looks in this picture. Romney returned to Utah and quietly returned to private life. He joined the boards of Marriott International and his son's investment firm and gave speeches at universities, although he mostly remained quiet about national politics. As 2016 inched closer and it was clear the Democrats were committed to running Hillary Clinton as their nominee, Republicans were desperate to recruit a candidate who could defeat her. In early January 2015, Romney began exploring a third presidential campaign. He spoke with donors and operatives, and polling showed he still held significant support among Republican voters. However, by the end of the month, he announced he would not run again, saying that while he believed he could win the nomination, he also believed another candidate might have a better chance at winning the presidency. With Romney officially on the sidelines, candidates began announcing their campaigns in droves, and by late spring, the field had basically become the NBA All-Star Game of 2015 Republican politics. Texas Senator Ted Cruz, Kentucky Senator Rand Paul, Florida Senator Marco Rubio, South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham, New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, Ohio Governor John Kasich, and Florida Governor Jeb Bush, just to name a few. In June 2015, Romney's former campaign supporter Donald Trump took the most consequential escalator ride of all time and announced his campaign for president. He took the stage and immediately made himself the main character of American politics for the next 10+ years.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're not sending you. They're not sending you. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people. But I speak to border guards, and they tell us what we're getting, and it only makes common sense.
Conservative commentators were dumbfounded. The political and media establishment were quick to mock and dismiss his campaign as dead on arrival. And yet, Trump continued to climb the polls. As Trump began to win more states and as more candidates continued to drop out, with some even throwing their support behind him, the establishment was desperate to derail his momentum. In March 2016, just a few days after Trump's dominant Super Tuesday performance that saw him become the clear frontrunner, Romney addressed the media in Salt Lake. While some speculated beforehand he would announce a last-minute campaign to retake the nomination, he simply urged Republican voters to reject Trump's campaign.
Here's what I know. Donald Trump is a phony, a fraud. His promises are as worthless as a degree from Trump University.
He wasn't the only major Republican leader to do this, and he was hardly the first, but having the 2012 nominee disavow the likely 2016 nominee symbolized how fractured the party was between the old guard and the new anti-establishment outsiders. Romney's speech did little to slow Trump's momentum, however, and he accepted the Republican nomination in June 2016. Despite winning the nomination, Romney still refused to campaign or endorse his successor. He ended up making no endorsements in the race at all and reportedly wrote in his wife Anne for president. However, despite the mountain of controversies and scandals, Trump massively outperformed the polling and was elected president in November 2016. His defeat of Hillary Clinton marked the first time a Republican candidate had won all of the Rust Belt states since Reagan's re-election in 1984. After the election and during the transition process, Romney and Trump met for dinner and allegedly discussed Romney becoming the Secretary of State in the new administration. They also released this photo, which is even better than the post-election picture he took with Obama in 2012. Trump would go on to nominate Rex Tillerson as his first Secretary of State, and Romney returned to Utah to begin his political comeback. In February 2018, Mitt Romney announced his campaign to represent Utah in the United States Senate after longtime Senator Orrin Hatch decided to retire rather than run for his sixth term. Romney was the immediate frontrunner, flush with campaign cash, and still one of the most recognizable Republican figures in the country. He also held strong credibility among conservatives critical of Trump, which was a big factor in the state. Despite Utah being one of the reddest states in the country, Trump only won the state in 2016 with 45%, while Romney won the state in 2012 with 72%. Ironically, within a few days of announcing, President Trump tweeted out his endorsement of Romney's candidacy. Despite Trump's endorsement, Romney faced some resistance at the state convention in April and placed second behind State Senator Mike Kennedy. Both advanced to the June primary, where Romney would secure the nomination with more than 70% support from Republican primary voters. From there, the campaign's outcome was inevitable. Romney would go on to easily win the general election with 62%. 2 days before he was sworn in, Romney published an op-ed declaring that Trump had not risen to the mantle of the presidency, reigniting their rivalry and setting an early expectation that he fully intended on being a thorn in Trump's side. Romney was sworn in as a U.S. Senator in January 2019 and immediately became one of the Senate's most aggressive Republican critics of Trump. He continued to publicly criticize Trump as details of the Mueller investigation dropped and criticized the administration's reluctance to arm foreign combatants in Syria. In September 2019, an intelligence community whistleblower's complaint revealed details of a phone conversation between Trump and Ukrainian President Zelensky. In the call, Trump asked Zelensky to investigate former Vice President Joe Biden and his son's activities in Ukraine. Democrats alleged that Trump was withholding nearly $400 million in American military aid to pressure Ukraine into announcing an investigation into the Bidens. For the Democrats who had just won back control of the House of Representatives, this was the opportunity they had been waiting for to oust Trump. Within weeks of the report, House Democrats filed articles of impeachment. The House narrowly passed 2 articles of impeachment, charging him with abuse of power and obstruction of Congress, making him just the third president in history to be impeached by the House in December 2019. Most observers expected the Senate to acquit him since Democrats needed 67 votes to remove him from office and they only had 47 members. The votes mostly fell along party lines, and on February 5, 2020, Trump was acquitted. However, Romney became the lone Republican to vote in favor of removing Trump on the charge of abuse of power. He didn't think Trump committed a crime with the Ukrainians, but he did think he abused his power by trying to cover up the whistleblower's report. Back in Utah, many Republicans were livid with Romney. Some called for him to be censured, while others called for him to resign or be removed from office. The Utah GOP ultimately decided against taking any actions against Romney and put out a statement clarifying they disagreed with his impeachment vote. What's that?
China reportedly running low on medical supplies and test kits, with nearly 20,000 confirmed cases, 428 known fatalities.
In March 2020, the coronavirus escaped from Wuhan and began to spread across the globe. Early data suggested the virus was tougher on elderly, overweight, and chronically ill people while posing little to no risk to young and healthy people. So naturally, the government treated this as a national emergency. Schools were closed, non-essential businesses were shut down, and in an attempt to stabilize the economy, Congress passed a $2.2 trillion stimulus package to subsidize industries and bribe people to stay locked indoors. What followed that summer can only be described as the 2020 summer of love. Black Lives Matter riots erupted across the country after George Floyd died during an arrest in Minneapolis. Businesses were looted and burnt, innocent civilians were killed, and Americans watched as their largest cities were turned into Mad Max sets. Many public leaders dismissed fears of these events spreading the virus people had supposedly been locked inside for, claiming that racism was the ultimate public safety risk. During these fiery but mostly peaceful protests, Romney joined demonstrators for a BLM march in Washington, D.C.
Hey, Senator, why is it important for you to be out here today?
We need a voice against racism. We need many voices against racism and against brutality. We need to stand up and say that Black Lives Matter.
By the midsummer of 2020, the presidential election matchup was set between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Once again, Romney refused to endorse either candidate. After nearly a year of unrest, pandemic fears, and financial insecurity, Joe Biden was declared the winner of one of the most controversial elections in American history. Trump refused to concede and over the coming months was joined by his allies in an attempt to prevent Biden's victory from being certified. They began calling on Republicans in Congress to reject the ceremonial Electoral College vote certification and urging them to investigate claims of voter fraud. Romney was one of the few prominent Republicans to refuse to join this effort and was confronted by constituents before a flight to Washington, D.C.
Put your mask on.
Don't tell me what to do.
Please put your mask on. It's required by law in this airport.
I'm standing 6 feet away.
I'm sorry. It's required in this
Okay, I'll
airport.
tell you
Put
what,
your
because
mask
you know
on.
what? I'm going to go ahead and do it because I want to have a chat with you. Why aren't you supporting President Trump?
Resign, Mitt! We want to know your connection to Burisma and Joe Biden, Mitt Romney.
Traitor! 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 Traitor!
The next day was January 6, 2021, the day the election was set to be certified. And it went about as smoothly as it could have.
This is a moment I never saw in my life. These individuals just rushed through security. It's hard to believe what we're seeing right there. They're just walking through. We're our Capitol Police.
After dispersing the protesters, Congress reconvened and officially certified the 2020 election. House Democrats drew up another set of articles to impeach Trump and quickly passed them, with even some Republicans joining the vote. The Senate would again vote to acquit him, but not before Romney cast his vote to remove Trump for the second time in a year. Once again, Utah Republicans were furious with Romney. When he returned home in May 2021 for the Utah Republican Convention, he was met with unrelenting boos and jeers from Republican delegates.
Please, thank you, show respect.
By then, it was clear that his chances at being re-elected in 2024 were dwindling. Back in DC and with Biden in office, Romney became one of 10 senators who negotiated the bipartisan infrastructure compromise that ultimately became President Biden's $1.2 trillion infrastructure package. While the bill was praised by some business leaders in Utah, its spending levels fueled inflation rates at a time when American families were still trying to recover from COVID lockdowns. Polls beginning in early 2021 showed Romney was slowly bleeding support, and by late 2022, the writing was on the wall. Only 46% of Utah Republicans approved of Romney, while more than 51% of statewide voters said he should not run for re-election. Eventually, he began skipping Utah Republican events altogether. In September 2023, the former one-term governor of Massachusetts announced he would not run for re-election in 2024 and serve just one term in the Senate. Trump would go on to have one of the greatest comebacks in American history and be re-elected president in 2024 despite Romney once again refusing to endorse him. Republican Congressman John Curtis was elected to replace Romney, and on December 4th, 2024, he gave his final speech in the Senate chamber. And that was it. Mitt Romney's political career was over. The man who was elected governor of Massachusetts and rose to the standard bearer of the Republican Party was brushed aside while his ultimate rival returned to the presidency. Since retiring, Romney has remained mostly quiet about politics, although he has occasionally chimed in to urge older generations to step aside, arguing that people 80 years or older should not be running the country. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.